Okay, we are live and recording.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Finance Committee, the February 10th Finance Committee meeting of the State Bar. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. And can I have our committee coordinator, Sam Tesoro, call the roll? So, Sam?
That's okay.
No, we're just trying to get, oh, I see. Go ahead.
Okay. Am I good to call the roll?
Yes, if you would, please, Sam.
Barahona,
Present.
Gore,
Here.
Grande,
Here.
Giorgiello,
Here.
Sowell.
Present.
We have a quorum, Chair.
Thank you so much, Sam. Next on the agenda is the call for public comment. And before we begin public comment, I would just like to remind everyone of some of the ground rules for speaking during this meeting, specifically under State Bar's policy regarding public comment. Members of the public cannot cede their time to another speaker. Any issues around deceiving the board by disguising your voice or using other aliases or those sorts of things like that are not allowed, as well as it's impermissible under the State Bar's policy against disruptive and disorderly conduct that may result in issues relating to whether or not you can continue to participate in the meeting. And we would appreciate your cooperation in adhering to these rules. I'd also like to remind everyone that if you want to participate in the public comment, you can use the raise your hand function that would allow you to do so. And that will appear on the screen, and you will be called on in the order in which hands are raised. And I think I'm gonna leave it there in terms of just I won't go through the whole blurb around public comment. And Sam, I think what I'm going to do is just sort of ask you whether or not there are members of the public that would like to make public comment to the Finance Committee today.
Yes, we currently only have one hand raised in Zoom, and that's Benjamin Cohn.
All right, before you go to Mr. Cohn, can I just ask members of the committee whether or not there is anyone where you are that has indicated that they'd like to make public comment? So do you have anyone at your location that would like to make public comment? Okay, and there's no one here in where I am either. And so, Sam, would you please call on Mr. Cohn?
Yes, but for the record, the timer for my Zoom isn't working, so Sharon is going to put the timer up, and I will announce when the timer is up.
Right. Well, Mr. Cohn, if I remember correctly, I think you have 3 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to address some of the comments made I think by you, Trustee Sowell, at one of the prior meetings about needing to get the legislature up to speed on your situation. And I believe that was in connection to the meeting where you declined to raise the exam fees very properly, but needed to find alternative funding sources. And that was directed to the staff, if I recall. And I believe I didn't see that much reflecting that in either productions responsive to my public records requests or in the agenda attachment. So I thought it was appropriate, as you discussed the strategy and the budget, that you asked for there to be an agenda item in the future to go over legislative priorities, and perhaps those legislative priorities could reflect the need to save some additional money on the bar exam through grants or subsidies. It could perhaps reflect the possibility of doubling down and increasing the savings that could be had by sticking with Kaplan, by amending the notice period under the statute to switch back to Kaplan from the MBE, so that you're not just not paying for both products in the future, more than 2 years after the Supreme Court issues notice, if the right decision is made, but so that you are not paying for both products and having to potentially go back on your decision to not raise the exam fees improperly to in order to switch not from the MBE to Kaplan sooner without resorting maybe to other positions that you would prefer not to resort to. The all of those things should have been brought to you by now in a legislative priorities agenda. I'm a little confused why they're not. And I would also encourage you to think about the realities of whether your budget and your limited resources allows for you to actually make the decision to go to next gen the way many of you seem to want to do. I think that really cannot be separated from the decisions about the exam fees. It cannot be supported by the existing exam fees. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Mr. Cohn, as always, appreciate your comments. Sam, anyone else may have joined us for and wishing to make public comment?
Currently, we have no other hands raised.
Okay. With that, we will proceed with our regular order of business in terms of today's agenda. Don't really have a lengthy at all chair report other than just to make note of the fact that we have 4 items on our agenda, 3 of which are actions items, which we'll have to take a vote on. One of which, the item 2.2, is just a discussion item, but probably it will be the bulk of our conversation will be around where we are as it relates to the general fund and where it is that relates to our emissions fund sort of budget at this particular juncture. And Sam, is Araceli in the queue to be promoted?
Yes, let me promote her.
Araceli, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, very good.
Delaying getting promoted.
All right. So the first item on the agenda today is approval of the 2026 Finance Committee work plan, and our Chief Financial Officer, Araceli Montoya Chica, will present these items. I think, Araceli, you're presenting all the items, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Very good.
Okay. Good afternoon, Finance Committee members. I am here to present the very first item today, which is the 2026 Finance Committee work plan. I don't have a PowerPoint for this item. It's relatively short, but it is the work plan is annually brought forward to the Finance Committee for input if need be, and it is developed with. I worked very closely with Arnie to develop the 26 committee work plan. It is attachment A of this agenda item, and it is basically just supposed to guide the committee's work for this fiscal year 2026. And there's several items included that are what I typically bring forward every Finance Committee meeting. So particularly anything having to do with the budget. So in the next agenda item, we will be reviewing the proposed budget, involvement in the any mid-year budget amendments. Then reviewing the quarterly investment reports and financial statements. And a few others that I don't want to list all of them, but attachment A does list all of the items that are going to be brought forward in 2026 to the Finance Committee. I do want to highlight one that is not recurring. It's one that is due to be presented this year, and that's going to be the 2026 General Fund Fee Analysis. This is just like we did the admissions increase in late 2025. This year, we are due to review again all of our general fund program fees and determine whether there's a need to increase the fee. So that exercise or that project will be later this year, and it's reviewed every 3 years in accordance to a board adopted policy. So that's one work plan objective, if you will, that's not normally recurring. And if there's any additional input or any additional work plan items that the finance wants to add, we can certainly do so now. Otherwise, Arnie and I developed this, and if there's any comments or questions, I'm happy to take those.
Any comments or questions from members of the committee about the work plan?
It's Deborah here in San Francisco. Thank you for the thorough memo and the attachment. In the work plan where it says, it's a reoccurring item that we participate in a mid-year budget review and approval. Are you recasting the budget at mid-year? I understand reviewing the budget, but what is the approval that's needed for a mid-year?
Sure. At mid-year, we assess where we are 6 months into the year, and we oftentimes do have budget amendments. And if we do propose budget amendments, we ask the finance committee and the full board as well to approve those.
So you recast the budget based on the amendments. Oh, okay. Instead of the variance, letting the variance report do that then.
Correct. If it's material enough, we do use certain thresholds depending on if it's in, a fund itself is over budget or under budget. We do certain budget amendments, but it's not just everything. It's based on certain thresholds. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
More from you, Trustee Gore?
That's it. Thank you.
Trustee Barahona, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I just had one thought, particularly after the public comment. And I don't know if we need to achieve this through the work plan or if there's another way to achieve it. So, but it would be helpful to have a sense of the sort of nexus between the recurring item statement and the sort of the overlay with our legislative priorities. I'm curious if there's like a dotted line we can make from and maybe, again, it's not through the work plan. There's another avenue to do that, but I just thought that would be really good to see as an overlap.
I do believe, and maybe Laura, Erica, you can help me out. In February, we might have an item that covers legislative priorities, or is it yes?
Yes, so we're set to have legislative priorities also come to the board in February, so we can try to look at that, Trustee Barahona.
Yeah, I think that the legislative priorities impact the budget and vice versa. The budget impacts the legislative priorities, I think. So I think maybe just figuring out how we draw that dotted line, maybe at that point in time, not through this work plan, but just it sort of raised that thought.
Araceli, it just occurred to me with Trustee Barahona's comments and Trustee Gore's comments. I mean, there are several folks that are on the committee that are pretty new to the Finance Committee. Would you mind maybe just sort of also speaking to schedule what we need to do in the month of February as it relates to our budget? And then, I know in the past, just because of workload issues, we've slipped a little bit on when we do some of the look back in terms of the prior quarter review. Would you just, you don't have to spend a lot of time on it, Araceli, but maybe just a paragraph or two, or just in terms of what the schedule looks like going forward.
Sure. So in February, it is a very important month because it's when the budget has to be adopted and approved. It's due to be submitted to the legislature on February 28th. So it has to be. So in February, usually the Finance Committee gets to see specifically the General Fund and Admissions Fund, because those are the funds that tend to need more attention. And then at the end of this month at the board meeting, the full budget will be presented and adopted. At the end of this month, we'll also be presenting the Q4 financial statements. And like Arnie said, a couple years ago, we were very short-staffed and we fell behind on bringing forward a little bit more timely the Q4 financial statement, or sorry, not the Q4, the quarterly financial statements, but we've since caught up. So in February, you also expect to see the results of the Q4 2025 results. And I think they'll show you kind of where we landed budget to actual as of the end of the year. And then the investment report will be later today, but there's not anything too crazy there. And I think that's all that comes in February. Yeah, the budget and the financial statements, I think, are probably most important agenda items brought forward.
Very good. Thank you for that, Araceli. Trustees, any other questions on the work plan? If there's no other questions on the work plan, I would entertain a motion. This is an action item that we need to move forward.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
So Sam, you get that? Trustee Giorgiello, with the first and Trustee Grandi with the second. I should ask for the resolution. I'm sorry. Trustee Giorgiello, I don't think this changes your motion, right? Now that
He's not. I will so move.
Okay. And Trustee Grandi, you good with the
Yeah.
second?
Second.
Okay. Sam, would you call the roll, please?
Sarah Hona.
Aye.
Gore,
Aye.
Grande,
Aye.
Giorgiello,
Aye.
Sewell.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries.
I think here's where we're going to spend the bulk of our time, which is the discussion item around the State Bar General Fund and admissions budget. And so this is item 2.2. And Araceli, I think you do have a presentation for this one.
Yes.
And I'll just let you take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Ernie. Yes, I do. I'm going to share my screen. So please let me know once you see it in the correct presentation mode, and hopefully it is in the correct presentation mode.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Great. So this is a discussion of the preliminary 2026 general fund budget and the admissions budget. It is a discussion item. However, there is an item in here that I would appreciate Finance Committee input on. I don't expect the numbers to change, but certainly if there's anything that the committee sees that we need to go back and fix or redo or reanalyze before the final budget is presented later this month to the budget, we can certainly do that. So first, I want to highlight really quick just the general fund projections, and I also wanted to give Arnie a response to your ask at last month's meeting, the voluntary reduction in force results. So first in the general fund, and I'll go in more detail in the subsequent slides, but we are projecting to have a $1.3 million deficit spending in 2026. And I do want to keep highlighting that $52 fee that was provided as part of our 2025 fee bill is due to sunset on January 1st, starting January 1st, 2028. And that $52 was meant to fund the salaries and benefits of our staff. It was tied to a staffing model of a 15% vacancy rate based on what's stipulated in the bill. However, what we are continuing to see year over year, particularly I would say the last 2 going on 3 years now, is that we keep seeing rising healthcare costs. We keep seeing our IT licenses increasing, and we really don't have control over those. So that, and then we have our negotiated COLAs that we have an MOU in place for. So all of these costs continue to rise and really outpace CPI. So keeping this $52 will really be critical for trying to stabilize the general fund in the future years. Now, really quickly on the results, the actual results for the voluntary reduction in force. So in 2025, in trying to accelerate achieving the 15% vacancy rate, we embarked on doing a voluntary reduction in force program. Our initial goal was that 50 employees in the general fund would take the RIF. However, by the time the budget was adopted for 2025, so last February, only 45 people or 45 of our employees participated, and of that, 37 belonged in the general fund. So we had anticipated that the 37 general fund employees would cost about $3.2 million. However, the actual cost ended up being just under $3 million. It was 2.9, and that was really because we had to backfill 10 positions of those that left the general fund. And that was because some of the critical positions that employees left just had to be backfilled. So we didn't quite meet our target of 150, but 2, we also ended up spending less, which is it's good it's good that we spend less, but on the flip side, the savings that we had anticipated in forecast years weren't as big as we had hoped. So we had hoped to have around just over $6 million savings from reduced headcount, but we only had about $5.2 million annually. And we had not assumed that these backfill positions would be back. In fact, last year when the 2025 budget was adopted, we didn't presume that these backfills would happen. So you will see that personnel costs, yes, there for sure there's savings there, but they're just not as much as we had hoped in future years. So now I'm going to go into the general fund budget for 2026. I will speak to the forecast years in the next slide. But for now, I want to focus on the first column, which is where we are with our 2026 budget. I don't anticipate any changes between now and the and the board meeting, but should there be something, we will certainly amend it. But for now, the total revenues in the general fund, we're budgeting to be about just over 118 million, and our total expenses almost 120 million. So that's about a $1.3 million deficit. On the revenue side, specifically, mandatory fees are the biggest component of the general fund. And there is minimal licensing growth, but each year we work with the Office of Research and Statistics to kind of forecast what we think attorney growth rates might be. And it's been relatively small in a couple of years. For 2026, we only included a 0.4% attorney growth rate. And the other fees line item that you see, this is where you may have heard me talk about late fees or non-compliant fees or reinstatement fees. So this line item, we did increase it from prior year by close to just under $1 million. We budgeted $2 million in 2026, which is up from 1.1 from 2024. It is true that 2025 ended with it exceeded our budget. I think we ended with 3.7 million of late fees or non-compliant fees in 2025. However, this isn't we don't expect to see revenues that high continuing on forever, really. We hope that the attorneys will be more in compliance. So we did want to increase the non-compliance fees, but we wanted to also be conservative and not assume that the same rate of non-compliance would happen and that we would get almost $4 million again. So we've adjusted it to 2 million. On the expense side, personnel costs, we have the negotiated 2% COLA included in there. We always include a vacancy rate. This year we have 9.6. This is based on actuals. And in terms of headcount is pretty static. Other than these two provisional law license positions, they are limited term positions. They're only about 200,000, and they're part of the program that was adopted last year. And we're going to try to have I don't know if they were hired yet, but 2 positions for this particular program in the general fund. Moving on to the next slide. So this is a continuation of the general fund, of the budget assumptions, excuse me. And the expense side, so there is, we are SB 47, the audit that's currently going on. There's that amount that's included in here. And I do want to highlight this next item, OPEB. So OPEB is our other post-employment benefits. Every year it's a discretionary contribution, but we've historically made a contribution to better fund our OPEB plan. And this is where I would like to seek Finance Committee input. Right now, the budget does not have any contribution for 2026 for OPEB. Again, the budget is at 0, but what the Finance Committee could consider is that at mid-year, we could revisit this number, and depending on how our revenues are doing, we can consider whether to fund the entire OPEB amount or maybe only fund partial amount at mid-year, depending on how our revenues are doing. This open contribution, if we had added it, would have been $2.8 million. So this is the next bullet point. We could also change the budget really after this meeting, and if the committee decides no, maybe we should fund the entire amount, well, that means we would need to add 2.8 million into the general fund budget, which would increase the total deficit to 4.2 million. Or we could say we should fund half of the amount, which would be 1.4 million, and the deficit would then increase to 2.8. So this OPEB contribution, as I mentioned, it is discretionary, and we have used it in 2024. We also skipped paying it just to help us manage our deficit in the general fund. So we can use it as a funding mechanism to try to lower our deficit, but we can't. At some point we have to keep paying it again. This has an impact on our funded status of the plan. Right now, we are pretty well funded. I think we're about 83% funded. So that's pretty decent, pretty good. But not funding it in the long term would mean our liability, our funded status comes down, and our liability would be higher in future years. So we do want to make sure at some point we revert back to funding this. So I maybe at the end of my presentation, I can get your thoughts on this particular item. Okay, now I want to move on to the forecast years and how we developed the assumptions that we developed in the forecast years. Because if you see at the very bottom, the surplus really, sorry, not the surplus, the deficit really jumps in 2028 and 2029. So again, on the revenue side, we apply the same growth rate in future years. So in the forecast years, we applied the same 0.4 attorney growth rate. We keep the same $52 in 2027. However, this is where you can now start to see in 2028, when the $52 goes away, our deficit jumps to 19 million. And it's because we lose about $10 million from that 52. And since we're looking into 2029, in 2029, we lose another component of the fee bill. That was $11 in total, but it was $550 for CTAP and $550 for the diversion programs. These sunset starting in 2029. So then you see the deficit jump even further to 25.5 million. So I think that's very important to note, but the revenue accounts for that. And again, we always apply a CPI adjustment to future years to anticipate the increased costs in the future. So all of the funds have a 3.7 CPI adjustment outside of personnel costs, since those are, we know exactly more or less what those costs will be. And there's this unfunded actuarial liability that we called it was the golden handshake, which gave an additional 2 years CalPERS service credits to anybody who retired in 2025 in the eligibility window. And this was basically a second component of our voluntary RIF. Anybody that retired within a certain window was able to get two additional years of CalPERS service credit. And this was CalPERS wide, it wasn't just the state bar. So there is a cost to the employer for doing this, and it's in the future. So this, for us, it starts kicking in, or the cost of this golden handshake starts kicking in the second half of 2027. So 2027 has that 800,000 included, and then in both 2028 and 2029, we have the full cost of 1.6 million. The 1.6 million is something that was determined by an actuarial review. These are the latest numbers we have as of today, but as we get closer later this year into next year, we should get more updated numbers. But for now, 1.6 is what we had. What we had is the cost of this golden handshake. So those increased amounts, or these additional amounts, are included in 2028 and 29. And then we also assume that we would continue the OPEB contribution again in future years. So we've added 3 million, which is about average. That $3 million is added back into personnel costs in 27 through 2029. And just some key takeaways that I wanted to highlight from both the budget and the forecast years. Obviously, the loss of the $52 is very significant to the general fund. Like I said, we lose about just over $10 million by losing that $52. So that's where deficit of 19 million in 2028 comes from. And then losing the additional $11 in 2029 further reduces our revenue by 2.2 million. So that increases the deficit by almost 25.5 million. The RIF that we did the RIF program that we did in 2025, yes, we had savings, but they were lower than what we had projected. So we've tried to save in other, particularly the professional services expense line items, and we have achieved some savings there. However, as I've mentioned, the rising costs of CalPERS, the rising cost of healthcare, and our technology subscriptions are really outpacing the savings that we've achieved in personnel expenses or service, for example. And I did want to highlight personnel costs. So if you look from 2026 to 2027, personnel costs increased pretty significantly, and as well as 2027 to 2028. So I just wanted to highlight the why of those increases, particularly in 26 to 27. Personnel costs went up by 8.5 million, which I know it's significant, but there's a reason why. One, for starters, we put the OPEB back in 2027, and that's $3 million of that change year over year. We also have our COLA and our merit that's a lot of, it's part of our negotiation. So that's almost another 3 million. As I've mentioned, CalPERS, we had to keep accounting for CalPERS increases. It's 1.8 million, or almost really 12%, right? The CPI that we put it in most categories is 3.7, but CalPERS is increasing almost 12%. So this is where, and these are costs that we don't have control over. This is something that we have to pay. The same for healthcare costs. They've increased 6.4%, whereas the CPI is trailing at 3.7%. So all of these components really are outpacing a lot of the savings we may achieve. And these are items that, other than OPEB, that we really have no control over. And they have been increasing the last couple of years. From 2027 to 2028, personnel costs also increase, and it's also really the same component. It's just a different amount. So merit is just under $1 million. CalPERS continues to increase another 9% or 1.6 million, and healthcare costs is another 600,000. So all of these compound and start adding to personnel costs. One last thing I want to highlight on the general fund is we own the LA building, and there are certain facility costs, in particular for a cooling tower and the air handlers in the LA building. There's costs to this that are not reflected in the budget, just because there is a lot of uncertainty regarding the timing and scope. But I did want to highlight it, and I did want to mention it. We asked our general services office, and they had gotten that replacing the cooling tower and air handlers would cost about 4.6 million. These were the last estimates from 2024, so they need to do a little bit more current contractor estimates, but these are two components or facility costs that at one point in the future we're going to have to replace. General Services is pursuing strategies to try to extend the useful life of these two cooling tower and air handles as much as possible. So for now, we don't anticipate having to do those in 2026, but if something happens, we have to replace this. And I just wanted to bring it up because it is going to be a significant cost, and at some point, we are going to have to include it in the budget. But just something I wanted to note there. Now I want to move on to the admissions fund. Again, I'll focus on the forecast slides in the next one, but for now, 2026 admissions revenues just under 32 million, with expenses at 33.6 million. So they are deficit spending for 2026 again of about 1.7 million. On the revenue side, of course, we included all of the board adopted service and exam fees that were approved in late 2025, particularly in exam fees. You see it's a lot lower than the forecast years, and that's because we still have about $1.7 million of revenue reduction in exam fees from the fee waivers that we gave. So the July bar exam this year will be the last opportunity for anybody who was eligible for these fee waivers to take to use it. So afterwards, it's not going to be carried onward. So it is a 1.7 million reduction, as we do anticipate most of that to be used in July, the July 2026 bar exam. I did want to highlight, though, that in the February bar exam, we did have a lot higher number of applicants than we had seen. It's about a 16% higher than the February 2024 bar exam. So that really, although we have that decrease of 1.7 from the exam fee waivers, there was an increase in applicants. So it kind of sort of helped offset the exam fees a little bit, but again, still lower than future years because of that 1.7. Exam related expenses are 8.5 million. There is, of course, a 2% COLA as well for the admissions fund. And the only change in headcount is really the conversion of one limited term position into a permanent. So in total, there is no headcount changes, but it's just converting a limited one into a permanent position. And in terms of the forecast, it's very similar. We apply a 3.7 CPI to every category of expenditures and revenues outside of personnel. One of the things I do want to highlight in the services line item, to be conservative, we did put a $2 million estimate for development costs. This is, again, we have to develop some new bar exam by July 2028. We don't know what that cost is, but certainly we know we're going to incur a certain amount. So to be conservative, we added in $2 million in 2027 and 2028 to try to account for that. Finally, the takeaways, admissions in 2026 does remain in deficit spending, even with the fee increases. Again, it's primarily the fee waivers that are still left over, but once the fees those fee waivers are left over, that impact is not going to carry forward, and revenue kind of stabilizes again in the admissions fund. And again, as a conservative estimate in 27 and 28, we added this $2 million. We don't know at this point. We work with the admissions office very closely. Actual costs, we don't know. It very well could exceed $2 million, but just to have something in the budget, we did in the forecast years, really, we included $2 million. Obviously, it's good. If I go back, it's, the admissions fund, if you see their deficit actually gets better in the forecast years, but in 2029, if it turns out that the cost of the new bar exam is not $2 million and it's $5 million, well, then that's going to impact the reserves, and maybe 2029 isn't going to look, as well. But for now, 2 million is what we've included in there until we know better numbers. And then finally, I just want to talk about the reserve balances for both the general fund and the admissions fund. At the end of 2026, with the deficit spending, the general fund is still projected to be at about $27 million, or 22%. This is within the reserve policy. So just a reminder, the reserve policy is on the low end 17% and on the high end 30%. So this is in 2026 and really in 2025, the general fund was able to maintain itself within the reserve floor and ceiling. It is within, like I mentioned, it is within the policy, but losing, you guys, as I mentioned in the previous slides, losing the $52 in 2028, really the fund becomes insolvent at that time. $20 million will wipe most of the reserves away. So we will have to definitely reduce our expenses to try to avoid insolvency, or certainly try to keep the $52 fee. For the admissions fund, the reserves are projected to end in 2026 by $2.2 million, or that's about 6%. It is below the 17% policy minimum. We do see the admissions fund stabilizing in 2027 and 2028. It's pretty much close to break even both of those years, so we're not eating into the reserves as much. And then come 2029, the admissions fund does go into surplus of, right now we're projecting 3.3 million. But again, it all depends on the cost of the development of this new bar exam, without knowing how much that's going to cost. Yes, they're in surplus in 2029, and their reserves, as long as we're close to break even, are going to be sufficient. But there is a little bit of worry if costs exceed well over the $2 million, while the reserves might not be sufficient. And that's all I have for now. So I can stop sharing my screen and take any questions.
First, I think I just want to make sure that Laura or Erica, anything that you may want to add that may round out Araceli's presentation, or any comments that you want to make, just to see if you had anything that you wanted to add to it.
Yeah, so Araceli and I have gone over the budget many a times to try to find areas. On the OPEB issue, again, it's something that can be revisited in that mid-year that Araceli mentioned earlier. Truth be told, we're probably not going to be in a better financial position next year as it relates to OPEB, but maybe we are currently well funded according to actuarial standards, but we want to of course monitor that. And if you're more comfortable with mid-year, we are happy to look at that to see what comes in relation to late fees and whatnot. As far as the bar exam, the cost of the future of the bar exam, we are doing a cost assessment that the board will be able to see coming up in, I believe in March, where we'll be able to better pare out those numbers based on the options discussed back in January.
I think the only other data point that I might just ask folks just to clarify for the committee is we are expecting an audit. And when is the audit? Is it end of the summer? I can't remember when we're expecting to get hit with our the next audit.
A new audit?
Or the one that the current audit.
We don't have a timeline at this time.
Okay. All right. Committee members, questions? This is a discussion item. I know we've been hammering at this in board meetings and in other finance committee meetings, and I don't think you're seeing, the numbers that sort of go along with a lot of our discussions at this particular point in time. But you aren't hearing conceptually anything new here, but you are seeing the actual numbers that and the empirical data that just sort of back up what we've been talking about. But once again, comments or questions? Trustee Barahona?
Yeah, I just have a few. Thank you so much for that, Araceli. In terms of the general fund or the admissions fund expenses, is there any one-time cost that we could cover in a different fund that has a positive, has very healthy reserves right now? Is there a world where we can reduce that expense from the general fund and admissions fund and move that expense to a fund that perhaps, while has restrictions on its purpose and use and intent, we could make a case for a one-time move to cover that expense?
Mm-hmm. I think that the trick here is that all the other funds are restricted, right? We at the state bar wouldn't be able to just make that decision. We probably would, if there's no restriction via statute, we would probably have to really get legislative approval. One of the funds that we've consistently discussed is the Client Security Fund that has pretty healthy reserves, and we've talked. I think back in 2023, we had proposed that when we didn't get the fee increase to try to use part of the CSF reserves to help fund the general fund. So there is, I'm trying to think of which fund, and the only one that comes to mind right now is the Client Security Fund, but we really would need legislative approval to be able to touch any of the reserves in any other fund, since they're all restricted.
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge.
So, Trustee Barahona,
yeah,
I can't think of any one-time funds, at least in admissions off the top of my head. We would have to go through the general fund budget, but it would, so if we were to seek legislative permission, again, it's likely they would only shift the monies for 1 year if they were to do it at all. The CSF fund is a fund that they may be likely to protect regardless that it's overfunded, just because of the purpose of it. So I think it's an ask that can be made. I don't know if we have enough justification for some of the one-time things to pull money away from that particular fund.
I would agree with you, and I do think that I think at some point when we have our legislative sort of priorities and sort of the conversations lined up that we're hoping to have, one of the things that I think is really important to perhaps include is the allowance annually of movement of funds up to X amount for Y purpose, and in this case, one-time purposes. If we're making IT investments, that's for safety. That does protect the public. That does increase our ability to serve the public in a better way. There's a case to be made there. So I just want to say that in terms of the one-time costs. But I also think that to see the deficit increase year over year on I think both funds, it would be great to see the sort of the reserve impact year by year. Because I do think that we're making a decision year by year, but ultimately to see these reserves get to insolvency and show that to the legislative, folks and to say, this is what we're actually projecting in terms of reserves. I think that might be a strong case to be made to A, keep that $52 fee, and B, these sort of opportunities for these one-time fund transfers, if at all possible. So I think that seeing that insolvency is going to be really helpful. And Araceli, you talked about it, but it's interesting to see it underneath those deficit numbers, because those are the cumulative reserves, right, that are dropping year after year after year, given the deficit.
Right.
Okay. And I think that was it for me.
Okay. Trustee Georgiello, I saw your hand next.
Yeah, as this being my first finance committee meeting, isn't the problem just fundamentally structural? You can't cut your way after a certain point, you can't cut your way to a balanced budget. I mean, we should be looking at ways to cut and all that. I'm not saying you don't do that, but at a certain point, there's just not enough revenue coming in. At the end of the day, whether it's fees from existing licensees, whether it's fees from persons seeking admission to the bar, whether it's reinstatement fees, whether it's money from the legislature in some way, shape, or form that's either unrestricted or less restricted, or a particular item that has caught my attention from the very first time I saw it on the finance materials is public-private partnerships, some way to bring cash into the bar. I mean, we are a regulatory agency. We are tasked with protecting the public, and running in deficit spending with a ballooning deficit over time is that's just unsustainable. And so I don't know where that comment goes, other than that's an observation as a first-time observer of this, or attendee of this committee. I'm struck by Arnie, your comment from when we had the discussion on the fee increases, that there's a certain degree of kicking the can down the road, right? We can only do that for so long. You just look at the numbers that were just presented to us. It doesn't work after a certain point.
Yeah. I mean, Trustee Georgiello, I mean, your deductions are right on. And, somebody's going to have to correct me on this, but I mean, we did not have a fee increase to the state bar for well over a decade, almost 2 decades. Am I correct, Erica and Araceli on that? And obviously, that put us in a position where we clearly have been behind the curve, and this structural this built-in structural deficit is there. One of the things that your comment made me think of, though, is, Araceli, we're looking at this as that this $52, when we had to do the exercise to get the fee increase, we sort of had to break down, the licensing fee into different increments. And that $52 was attached to a certain part of the functions and the operations of the bar. I mean, it would seem to me at some point in time we're going to need to do this again, and maybe we should do it in the near term and because I'm not sure that $52 is the right number. I'm not sure we'd be asking just for $52 for that particular increment, or just $11 for the other increment. And so at some point, and I don't know if that is something that we should charge the finance team with doing right now, just to try to get an early jump on it. It seems a little premature, but at some point we are going to have to go through that analytical exercise again.
Mind me asking one more question? What is our authority as a finance committee and as a board of trustees to turn the dial on revenue? What is our ability to increase licensee fees and all that? I mean, does that have to go through the legislature, or do we have authority to do that?
Our main, the general fund, our main licensing fee, that is legislative authority. There are other fees that we do have the authority to turn up, and we have been doing that. But I mean, the bulk of our money comes in through.
All the money comes from, yeah.
Yep, and that is totally reliant on where the legislature is, how they're perceiving where we are. More from you, Trustee Giargiello?
Thank you.
Trustee Grandi?
Thank you, Araceli, for the presentation. I don't remember if we've talked about this before in this committee, but I guess my question is, and I know our agency is unique compared to other states, other bars, but I guess the question that I have is, are other state bars dealing with this deficit issue? And the other part of it is, are other licensing agencies here in California dealing with these deficit issues? I'm just curious, are other people doing it really well? And I guess I would be more comparable to different agencies here in California with their size would be comparable to our budget. But yeah, I would be curious if you know anything about that or if there's been any research on that.
Okay. I honestly do not know if other just state bars in the country are also experiencing deficit positions. I don't know if maybe, I don't know, Erica, you or I don't know if you would, Eileen, have any input in other agencies in California. Um, necessarily. It is true what Arnie said. The state bar received its second fee increase in I think it was 20 years. So obviously that really hurt the general fund. If costs, you guys have seen it, it's increased in 20 years. Certainly it's increased, and we only had the second fee increase, from what I understand, in 20 years in 2025. So our reserves were able to get us through for all of those years. I don't know what other, or maybe you, Laura, if you have any input as well. I don't know, for example, the medical board, what
Yeah, so
where
I
they
think
are with their
it's a
license.
hard comparison to make, trustee, because the state bar is solely funded on its own. We don't receive general fund monies from the state unless we're talking some of those grant programs that flow through other agencies. So for Araceli's example, the medical board, their budget requests go through the governor's office in advance of the budget. They get put into the state budget. We don't have that. What we get is we have our own. We have the ones that Trustee Sewell mentioned that we can raise on our own, such as the cost for the bar exam or the cost for the first year law students exam in the admissions area. The actual licensing fee, we do have to get legislation every year, authorization every year to charge that fee. I do agree that we should start the analysis, given that the expiration of that $52 is on, I believe it's Jan 1, 2027? 2028. It's a little bit in advance, but we are already kind of putting feelers out related to that, knowing that it is such a critical item for us.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments from trustees?
Yeah.
Araceli, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, it's Deborah. It's just so particular in this year. Had we not had, the dust up with the exam, yeah, I feel like we would be on more solid ground to be able to raise the fees. But it does feel quite punitive to have, the operations difficulties that also put an additional, I don't know, $2-3 billion or $1 million on the operating budget, and then to go into the to increase the fees. That's the trade-off for me. If it was a regular year, as it were, we probably would be able to sustain it. So I just think there's this unfortunate situation we find ourselves in where we're trying to be sensitive to what we have put the public through fiscally and financially, and then at the same time raise fees. So it's just this, it's just an odd peculiar situation. To also inquire about the investments. So I know we have a super conservative investment policy, and I just don't know how much of it is tied to any of the pension, but I know we have the ability to liquidate. The CFO has the ability to sell some securities if we wanted to. Has that ever been done, where a one-time access into the investment portfolio to help the operating portfolio?
Since I've been here, no, we haven't had the need yet because reserves had always been sufficient. That investment, though, it is, your reserves are basically your savings account, and those investments are already accounted for in the reserves. I haven't had to liquidate an investment early for cash flow purposes yet because the reserves have always, even though we've been deficit spending, the reserves have to date always been sufficient. So that need has not happened yet, at least not since I've been here.
Trustee Georgella, I see your hand again.
Yeah, I just had one question, I think, for Laura, which is just to be clear, in our meeting in January, we put off a final decision on the bar exam. The one piece of data that was clearly missing in that, and it's not ready, I guess. I just wanted to make sure when we get to a point where the Board of Trustees is going to make a decision on the next bar exam, will we have the next gen option will cost approximately X. The California option will cost approximately Y. Will we have that level of granular detail to include in our decision on which bar exam to take?
Yes, so given the two options, the board approved to look at further in the January meeting. Admissions, Donna Hershkowitz and team are working on a more in-depth cost assessment that will be presented to you in March, actually.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. I heard you guys wanted to make sure I heard that correctly because that there's a big number in there set aside $2 million, and that may or may not be right.
It largely will depend on option chosen. Some costs will just transfer over. They will be the same cost. Some costs will drop dependent on the type of the exam, say like printing costs or different things. So we need to look at all of those pieces. And so we're analyzing the two options that the board moved forward in January.
Thank you.
Ernie, sorry, I just wanted to kind of highlight some points more on the commentary you made. This year we are due to the other fees category in the general fund. That's where the general fund also has certain programs, just like the admissions has all of their, I think, 11 programs. The general fund also has some. So, for example, LLP renewals, lockup renewals, certificates of standing. Those are, we have discretion to increase those fees, and my office, my staff is going to work this late spring into summer on reassessing all of those fees, and we will bring back an agenda item sometime in the summer for consideration. My guess is we will probably need additional fee increases there, so that'll help at least in future years revenue in the general fund. But it's not the biggest component. It will help, of course, but it's not the biggest component. Mandatory licensing fees are. The population really of actives, which is where most of our fees come from, isn't growing. Last year we had a 0.17% attorney growth. This year we have 0.4. So the attorney growth rates are really not keeping up with the costs that we're incurring. So that's an important point to make. And in terms of the 20, we are actually due to present back to the legislature. I think it's in 2027. We could accelerate it. And we do have it in our project plan that we are going to have to crunch numbers again. And I do agree with you, Arnie. I don't think the $52 is going to be sufficient anymore. We did this assessment in 2023 when we asked for the $52. Costs have completely, I wouldn't say completely, but they're different today than they were in 2023. Certainly by 2026 or 2027, they're a lot different from 2023. And as I mentioned in my presentation, it's healthcare costs keep going up year over year, and CalPERS costs have gone also up year over year. So those are key components of personnel costs and that $52 that we analyzed in 2023.
Yeah, maybe. I'm sorry, Lori, please.
I just wanted to clarify to Trustee Giorgello's question. The amount, the 2 million set aside for the bar exam, those are in 2028 because that's when it would change over. So that's the projections. If it is lower than that, obviously we would adjust that as we move forward.
Understood.
I think one of the things, and we don't need to do this. I think maybe at the full board meeting, maybe this month, maybe one of the things that we could just sort of talk about is some of the calendaring of when it is that we would need to start working on, that fee structure kind of analysis, because yes, the $52 goes off in 2028, but we can't wait till 2028. I mean, we need to probably next year or later this year need to start having some of these discussions about what we're going to approach the legislature with in terms of a request for a fee increase. And so maybe at the full board meeting, we can just sort of talk about what that calendaring might look like as we discuss the adoption of the budget for this year. Does that work?
I concur with that. Yeah, and I would argue for later this year to be seriously thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Patty,
Yes, Chair. So I also think that there has to be some scenario planning, sort of plan A, plan B, plan C, because I think that we may have to consider other options if the fee increase dissipates. So I think that, and I think we should know what those options are before making the decision of, for next year's budget, right? We should sort of know what the future impacts would be, and have that at least some thinking there.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, I think that those are all important topics to probably include in the conversation that we have on the adoption of this year's budget at the full board meeting. So we're just going to commend to my fellow trustees to reserve their comments till then, or repeat their comments again at that particular point in time. I just want to make sure. I think we were only scheduled to go to 3. I want to make sure that folks can keep going. We have 2 more items. I don't want to lose a quorum. Are we good to go, everybody, for at least maybe another 10, 15 minutes? Okay. Araceli, I think probably going to ask you to be relatively succinct, but I just want to make sure that we can keep folks for a little while longer. So this was just a discussion item, and so no need to no vote here. So we'll move to item, unless there's anybody else just on this item, just in closing on 2.2. We good? Okay. Araceli, would you go to item 2.3, which is the annual review and approval of investment policy? Trustee Gore kind of hinted at this already in some of her comments, but maybe this will be helpful to her in terms of giving her a little bit more of a flavor of what our investment policies are.
Sure. So on an annual basis, the board manual does require that the finance committee review the investment policy and any proposed changes if need be. Our policy aligns with the California statement policy, so we don't invest in anything that the California statewide policy doesn't. Our investments are very conservative. They're primarily commercial paper, government bonds, or T-bills, treasury bills. Obviously, there's the objectives of the policy. It's safety and diversification, liquidity, and making sure we're getting a decent rate on return. Attachment A, is the actual red line of the policy, since there's a couple of changes, but all of the sections are listed in your attachment. I'm not going to go through all of them. There's 2 proposed changes this year, and those are in section 3. So section 3 is the investment instruments that are authorized by the state of California, and it's the chart. They're very minimal changes. It's just really to align with what the California investment policy is, and those are listed in the agenda. So it's the changing of the number of maturity days for commercial paper. And the second one is the addition of the placement service deposits and placement service certificates of deposits. This is redline on page 5 of the attachment A, so you could see what the changes are. We don't really, I haven't, there is no plan to purchase this kind of investment, but I am revising the policy just to make sure it aligns with what the California policy changes are. And that's, I think, all I have on this one. It's really just the policy itself, and any revisions, which are the 2 that I've mentioned there. If there's any questions.
Trustee Gore, I was just sort of saying to the fellow trustees that are maybe new to the committee, I mean, our investment policy is pretty much dictated by state parameters, and we don't have a whole lot of authority to go outside of those bounds. As Araceli has mentioned, I mean, even within the bounds of that policy, our investments have saved us in terms of because interest rates have been as high as they've been. As those interest rates start to decline, I mean, we're going to see some eroding of what we've seen over the last few years in terms of revenues generated from our investments or investment policies. But I just thought I would just sort of share that. But comments, concerns, questions about the investment policy? Trustee Gore, you hope this is helpful to you.
Yeah, no, I realize that the investment policy is aligned with the state and how conservative it is. It doesn't speak to when you liquidate. So I'm not saying go outside of the boundaries. You can always pour money in, and then take money out. So that's what I was saying. When can you have a liquidity activity?
Well, I thank you for that clarification. Other comments or questions on the investment policy? Sam, could I get you to put the resolution up? I'm going to need a motion because this is an action item. And Araceli did point out that there are just a couple of minor changes here.
So moved.
Trustee Barahona, was that you?
Yes.
Okay, and Trustee Jargello, you were the second?
Yes.
Okay. Sam, did you get that?
Yes.
All right, we call the roll, please.
Barahona?
Aye.
Gore?
Aye.
Grande?
Aye.
Giorgello?
Aye.
Sewell?
Aye.
With 5 ayes and 0 nays, the motion carries.
Very good. Last item of the day is approval of the 2025 Q4 investment report.
Yes, this is the last item, and I'll also go through it rather quickly. I don't have a presentation. This is one of the recurring items that is brought forth to the committee on a quarterly basis. So this is the Q4, the 3 months ended for 2025. All of our investment, as I mentioned, and it's attachments A1 and A2 in the agenda. They're all with Wells Fargo, other than LAIF, which is the State Treasurer's Local Agency Investment Fund. We have just under 340 million there. This is maybe to address a little bit, Deborah. You see that some of these investments have their maturity dates, and a lot of these for right now, they are more short-term investments versus long-term because the best rates are currently still short-term investments. So that's what when an investment matures, I focus on what is the best yield we can earn, and right now it's still short-term investments. So you see them all listed there by maturity level. Yes, we can liquidate any if need be. You might be at a loss depending on where the market rate is versus what you purchased it at. But as I mentioned, I haven't had to do that yet. You do see that the rates, yes, they are coming down. Last year we had 4.5. The quarterly rate of return was 4.5.3%. Now it's 3.91. So yes, they're coming down. LAIF is also coming down. In 2024, the same period was 4.48, and now it's 4.09. So as there's more Fed cut rates, which I think are anticipated later this year, you are going to see those investment rates do come down. I think the last couple investments I've purchased were now in the 3.7-ish yield. So those will probably come down a little bit as the Fed continues to cut rates. But they're still better than what they used to be, I think 4 years ago or 5 years ago. And that's all I have for this particular item.
Any comments or questions about the Q4 investment report? I would just sort of say, if you're interested, I mean, Araceli has, I know with Trustee Trejo used to spend a fair amount of time with Araceli, sometimes walking through, what some of the investment options might be. And I would, if folks are interested, I know that Araceli would, because she's the actual person that is making making these investments on behalf of the bar in her position in terms of looking across those various instruments and being able to make those decisions. And so if folks have an interest in learning more about how she actually goes about making some of those decisions, I would just commend you to spend some time with Araceli about some of that to learn more. Okay. I don't see any hands on this one. Sam, would you mind putting up the reso? I just need a motion and a second to adopt the Q4 investment report.
Moved.
Second.
All right, moved by trustee Jargello and second by trustee Grande. Sam, you mind calling the roll again, please?
Sarah Helena.
Aye.
Gore,
Aye.
Grande,
Aye.
Targillo,
Aye.
Sewell.
Aye.
Is that an aye?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, 5 ayes and 0 nays, motion carries.
I think, somebody correct me if, I think that's all the business before us today.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks everyone for your participation. I think Laura and Erica, I think I may be supposed to be in another meeting with the two of you.
Yeah.
Very shortly. I will be on very shortly. But appreciate everyone, and I mean, I guess all I can just say is that we just need to continue to have these types of conversations so that the full board is understanding where the finance committee is coming from in terms of what it is that we'd like to see happen here, as well as then be able to translate that into conversations that the team is also having with the legislature as well. So I think we'll rerun a lot of this and a lot of those comments at our full board meeting a little bit later on this month. So we just encourage folks to keep pushing on this. Okay. I think with that, we're adjourned. Appreciate everybody. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Aye.